Hey there, and welcome to this deep dive into the weird, wild, and wonderfully retro world of Barbarella, 1968. If you've always been curious about Jane Fonda's space-age glam, those quirky robot dolls, or the shocking behind-the-scenes drama, then buckle up. We're about to rocket into 30 little-known facts about this cult classic. Think outrageous costumes, 1960s futurism, comic book origins, and a dash of scandal. Ready to soar through cinematic history? Let's go! Based on a French comic. You might have spotted Barbarella's outlandish tone and suspected it didn't just appear out of thin air. And you'd be right. This movie sprang from Jean-Claude Forest's 1962 French comic strip, originally serialized in the men's magazine, V Magazine. The original comics leaned heavily into erotic and satirical sci-fi themes, pushing boundaries long before the cinematic version. Forest, a stylishly rebellious artist, drew inspiration from the sexual liberation happening around him in France. So, when producer Dino De Laurentiis got his hands on it, he saw an opportunity to bring that psychedelic, boundary-breaking vibe to the big screen. According to older interviews in French pop culture publications, the comic caused more than a stir among conservative readers, and that was precisely what appealed to the forward-thinking, and sometimes controversial, folks in 1960s filmmaking. First sci-fi comic film. Barbarella isn't just any adaptation, it takes the honor of being the first feature film adapted from a sci-fi comic book. We've all heard about older serials like Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers from the 1930s, but those were episodic, weekly cliffhanger shorts rather than full-blown cinematic events. In contrast, Barbarella was a full-length feature, bridging the gap between classic pulp imagination and the daring vibe of the late 1960s. Modern superhero film historians sometimes compare Barbarella to the proto-superhero flicks that paved the way for today's comic-based blockbusters. True, the film's brand of sci-fi is more about free love, shag carpets, and futuristic weirdness than the traditional hero's journey, but it occupies an essential place in the lineage of adapting illustrated stories to film. Jane Fonda's hesitation. When you watch Jane Fonda decked out in plastic space bikinis and thigh-high boots, it might seem like she was all in from day one. Actually, Fonda initially hesitated to join the project. According to interviews she gave decades later, she was worried about the role's overt sexuality, especially considering it was being directed by her then-husband, Roger Vadim, who had a reputation for provocative films, including And God Created Woman, starring his former wife, Brigitte Bardot. Fonda thought Barbarella risked being a vapid piece of cheesecake. Vadim, however, pitched it to her as playful satire, blending comic absurdity with subtle commentary on moral codes. The combination of rebellious 60s energy and Vadim's cinematic flair swayed her. In retrospective interviews, Fonda admitted that while she found it somewhat silly, the entire experience was bizarrely liberating. Brigitte Bardot influence. Speaking of Bardot, it turns out that Jean-Claude Forest actually modeled Barbarella's look on her. Bardot herself got wind of the adaptation, but promptly declined any involvement. People who were close to Bardot say she was wary of repeating the same controversy that had followed her early career. Producer Dino De Laurentiis also made overtures to Sophia Loren, but she felt the film's sexual provocations didn't align with her on-screen image. This left the door open for Jane Fonda, whose background in comedic roles and growing popularity suited the unusual blend of camp and bold sexuality. In a roundabout way, Bardot's refusal helped Fonda land the iconic gig that changed her career trajectory. Zero-gravity striptease trick. One of Barbarella's most iconic images is that dreamy zero-gravity striptease in the opening credits. If you're thinking they used fancy NASA rigs, think again. The filmmakers placed Jane Fonda on a sheet of plexiglass above a backdrop of a rotating spaceship image. She posed, turned, and teased the camera while stagehands manipulated the background. Eagle-eyed viewers who spot reflections in Fonda's gloves can see the illusions at play. Some of those spacescape prints bounce back in the shot. It was a challenge for Fonda to move gracefully while pinned in place, but the result is pure 60s sci-fi glamour. Fonda once admitted she was still nervous about the nudity, so rumor has it she chugged a little liquid courage to get through the day. Fonda's vodka boost. Before filming that legendary opening, Fonda wrestled with insecurities about her body, a fact she later discussed in interviews. She confided that she drank vodka, just enough for a confidence boost, before the cameras rolled on the nude scenes. It was an era when on-set boundaries were far more fluid, and Fonda's personal nerves were matched by the crew's excitement over capturing something so risque for mainstream cinema. In a 1970s talk show, she recalled the shoot as surreal, but also bizarrely fun once she was in character. She eventually credited that moment as a strange turning point in her comfort with self-expression on film. 8 screenwriters. If you think Barbarella feels like a narrative collage of camp, satire, and random erotic vignettes, that might be because the script was written and rewritten by a whopping 8 different writers. Terry Southern, famous for Dr. Strangelove and Easy Rider, kicked things off, but Roger Vadim, Jean-Claude Forest, and several others contributed along the way. Each one had a different vision. Was this a comedic romp, an intergalactic morality tale, or pure pop art spectacle? The final film ended up being a dizzying stew of all 3. Producer Dino De Laurentiis reportedly told them to preserve the joyous spirit of the comic, even if that meant heavy rewriting. Dino De Laurentiis' ambition. Dino De Laurentiis was known for being fearless when it came to ambitious productions. Just look at Flash Gordon, 1980, or his attempts at Dune. With Barbarella, he believed he could meld provocative sexuality with futuristic design, reflecting the sexual revolution that was in full swing during the late 60s. In an archived interview, De Laurentiis said he wanted to show tomorrow's morality, implying a future where free love is the norm, ironically policed by cartoonish villains. Critics at the time were divided. Some saw it as a forward-thinking testament to women's liberation, while others panned it for being exploitative. But De Laurentiis, never one to shy from controversy, forged ahead, confident the movie would make waves. Filmed at Cinecittà. Production took place mainly at Rome's legendary Cinecittà Studios, the same place Fellini had shot his masterpieces. The team also used a rented castle near Rome, where Jane Fonda, Vadim, and co-star John Philip Law could stay for convenience. Law, who played the angelic Pygar, later reminisced about the communal vibe of living near the set. Working in Italy meant they had access to a deep pool of craftspeople who excelled at building lavish, imaginative sets on limited budgets. Barbarella's plush spaceship interior, for instance, was a testament to Italian artisanship. If you look closely, you'll see details that appear in other 60s Italian genre movies. At Cinecittà, set pieces often got recycled for different productions. Shag carpet spaceship. If there's one detail that screams 60s pop culture, it's the caramel-colored shag carpeting that lines Barbarella's spaceship, the Alpha 7. The aesthetic perfectly sums up the film's retro-futurist approach, advanced technology couched in the ultimate expression of 1960s kitsch. Production designers for the film took heavy cues from mod fashion, op art, and the era's obsession with space exploration. So the interior design reflects a bizarre collision of NASA fantasies and hippie living room comfort. While it looks silly today, that shag carpet was, at the time, a playful artistic choice, emphasizing Barbarella's carefree approach to cosmic travel. Paco Rabanne's costumes. Jacques Fontaret and Paco Rabanne led the costume design, giving Fonda an array of revealing outfits made from transparent plastic, metal rings, and vinyl. Rabanne, known for his avant-garde runway collections, jumped at the chance to craft futuristic silhouettes. He believed that fashion would eventually move away from traditional fabrics to incorporate more space-age materials. Barbarella became a prime showcase for those ideas. Think bustiers made of chainmail or clear suits that highlight more skin than they cover. In style magazines from the era, these looks were praised for being innovative, though moral conservatives called them scandalous. Today, you can spot their influence in everything from runway shows to music videos. David Gilmour's contribution. Yes, the Pink Floyd connection is real. David Gilmour, who would soon rise to legendary status with Floyd, served as a session guitarist for portions of the film's score. The soundtrack, composed primarily by Charles Fox and Bob Crewe, was known for its groovy lounge feel, light horns, bouncy bass lines, and dreamy vocals that mirrored the film's playful eroticism. Gilmour's involvement was overshadowed at the time since he wasn't yet the superstar we'd see on Dark Side of the Moon. Decades later, references in Pink Floyd fan communities mention Gilmour's cameo in Barbarella's music sessions as a little nugget of trivia. Duran Duran's name origin. If you've ever jammed to Hungry Like the Wolf or Rio, you've enjoyed the sounds of Duran Duran, whose name was inspired by Barbarella's villain, Duran Durand, played by Milo O'Shea. In the film, Duran Durand is a mad scientist turned tyrant, and the British pop band found the name so catchy they just tweaked the spelling. They first performed under that moniker in Birmingham's nightclub scene around 1978. In interviews, the band members have jokingly cited Barbarella as the perfect example of camp cool, exactly the vibe they wanted to project with their early 80s image. Sogo's biblical nod. The decadent city-state called Sogo is a deliberate reference to Sodom and Gomorrah, implying a place rife with vices, hedonistic pleasures, and moral unraveling. Writer Terry Southern apparently pushed for that biblical parallel to underscore the ironically childlike innocence of Barbarella in a land of corruption. The set design, filled with swirling colors and disorienting architecture, underlined that theme. The city's name was short, punchy, and weird enough to stick in viewers' minds. Contemporary critics, especially those from religious or conservative circles, balked at how openly the film seemed to mock biblical cautionary tales, but that was precisely the rebellious sense of humor behind it. Creepy robot dolls. Those twin girls controlling razor-toothed robot dolls are the stuff of sci-fi nightmares. This particularly horrific detail didn't come from the original comic. Instead, it was invented for the film to inject a bit of truly unsettling tension early on. The doll's chomping metal jaws stand out starkly against the otherwise playful vibe, reminding viewers that Barbarella's galaxy isn't all fun and games. Interviews with the film's special effects team revealed that the dolls were surprisingly cumbersome, with motors that kept jamming. The on-screen result, though, is a memorably eerie scene that has found new life in fan art and collectible figurines. Excessive machine failure. Among the film's most iconic sequences is Barbarella's forced encounter with the excessive machine, a contraption designed to kill victims through pleasure overload. The device malfunctions when Barbarella's own sexual appetite fries its circuits, culminating in a comedic meltdown. Many viewers interpret this as a cheeky statement on how unstoppable female agency can triumph over patriarchy, though others simply enjoy the camp absurdity. According to some behind-the-scenes sources, the original design for the excessive machine was even more outrageous, but the production toned it down, mindful that they were already testing boundaries for mainstream audiences. Anita Pallenberg's dubbing. Anita Pallenberg, who portrayed the Great Tyrant, or Black Queen, had a distinct accent that producers worried might be incomprehensible to non-Italian audiences. So they had her dubbed by British actress Joan Greenwood, known for her sultry, precise voice. The voice mismatch perplexed some viewers, but most found Greenwood's velvety tone added to the tyrant's seductive menace. Pallenberg herself was a fixture of the swinging London scene, famously involved with the Rolling Stones' Brian Jones and Keith Richards. Her on-set rapport with Fonda was reportedly strong, though their characters often squared off in scenes that dripped with veiled sexual tension. Marcel Marceau's speaking role, legendary mime. Marcel Marceau popped up as Professor Ping, a wise but odd mentor figure to Barbarella. It's a rarity to hear him speak in a film, given his international fame as Bip the Clown, his silent stage persona. Marceau fans might find it surreal, yet also oddly fitting, that he used his gentle, contemplative voice to embody a character who guides Barbarella through Sogo's twisted underbelly. In interviews, Marceau called it an intriguing challenge. He was used to mesmerizing audiences through pantomime, but here he had to deliver lines in a bizarre cosmic setting. Welsh password gag. Dildano, the bumbling revolutionary leader, uses the infamous tongue twister Lanfair Pulgwyn Gil Gogari Quirndrob Wulanti Silio Gogogoch as his password. Yes, that's an actual Welsh village name, known to be the UK's longest place name. This comedic moment parodies the exotic-sounding, impossibly long codes that appear in many sci-fi tales, but it also winks at the real British culture the film partly lampoons. In promotional interviews, Terry Southern loved to highlight this gag as proof that the movie never took itself too seriously, no matter how outlandish the sets and costumes might be. Catholic condemnation. The National Catholic Office for Motion Pictures slapped a condemned rating on Barbarella, calling its nudity and perceived sadomasochistic elements morally unacceptable. This condemnation put the film on a list that theaters in heavily Catholic areas were advised to avoid or limit. The controversy, however, only amplified Barbarella's allure among younger audiences who were curious about anything deemed sinful. The film's producers relished the free publicity, with Dino De Laurentiis famously shrugging off moral outrage by declaring that cinema needed to embrace the changing social landscape. Box office underperformance. For all its hype and scandal, Barbarella didn't exactly rake in mountains of cash. Its 1968 North American earnings totaled around $2.5 million, modest even for the era. Critics and reporters pointed out that the film's erotic camp might have been too niche for mainstream audiences who typically flock to musicals or big costume dramas. Over in the UK, though, it found stronger success, coming in second place behind The Jungle Book in certain markets. Over time, it turned into a cult favorite, playing in midnight showings and eventually gaining a robust afterlife in home media, where audiences were more open to its offbeat charm. PG re-release. When Star Wars ignited a science fiction craze in 1977, Paramount tried to cash in by reissuing Barbarella under the title Barbarella, Queen of the Galaxy. To snag a PG rating, they edited out some of the more risque bits, including the nude opening. This sanitized version introduced the film to a younger audience who found themselves baffled by the patchwork style. Some of the references to sexual humor were still in the dialogue, even though the visuals were toned down. Eventually, home video and DVD releases restored the original cut, which is what most fans recommend seeking out today. Cut Black Queen scene. Lobby cards from 1968 show glimpses of a seductive scene between Barbarella and the Black Queen on a lavish bed. But no known print of the movie includes this footage, fueling speculation about lost reels or a cut so risque it never made final approval. Collectors have spent decades chasing rumors that a European version might contain the sequence, but all evidence suggests it was removed in the editing process for fear it would tip the film from playful innuendo into explicit territory, risking a ban in multiple countries. Antonio Sabato's lost role. Italian actor Antonio Sabato initially portrayed Dildano, filming sequences that included the hand sex scene. However, the final cut replaced him with David Hemmings. This last-minute switch has fueled collectors' interest in set photos and promotional stills, where Sabato clearly stands in the Dildano costume. No official explanation was ever given, though rumors swirl about scheduling conflicts or chemistry issues. Sabato, already a heartthrob in Italy, rarely spoke about it in interviews, presumably disappointed his big Hollywood break ended up on the cutting room floor. Tame parakeet attack. The moment where Barbarella is attacked by swarms of birds was intended to be a suspenseful set piece. But parakeets turned out to be far too docile, especially after stagehands tried to entice them with birdseed to swarm around Fonda. The result was more comedic than terrifying. Some cast members joked that the birds were friendlier than the on-set cats. Ultimately, the sequence remains a weird aside, overshadowed by more memorable set pieces like the excessive machine or the angelic flight scenes with Pygar, double bill with Diabolic. In some regions, Barbarella was released as a double feature with Danger, Diabolic, another campy Italian-made comic adaptation produced by Dino De Laurentiis and starring John Philip Law in the titular role. This double bill was a crash course in over-the-top 60s Europop aesthetics, exactly the kind of escapist entertainment that drive-in audiences wanted. While Barbarella leaned heavily on playful eroticism, Diabolic was more about heists and subversive anti-hero chic. Critics of the time described these double bills as a neon-lit carnival of style, big on visuals and short on logic, which, for many viewers, was exactly the point. Omitted comic elements. Even though the film sometimes feels jam-packed with outlandish scenarios, it actually toned down certain events from Forrest's comics. Storylines involving a subterranean mole machine and a post-mortem robot sex encounter never made it into the script. The creative team felt these episodes could push the film beyond its comedic camp vibe into territory that might trigger a strict ban in multiple countries. Some fans of the comic lament the omissions, claiming they perfectly encapsulated the darkly satirical humor Forrest was known for, but the final film still kept plenty of the author's playful spirit, just more streamlined. Fonda's career shift. By the time Barbarella was wrapping up, Jane Fonda was on the brink of monumental change. Within a couple of years, she would become an outspoken activist against the Vietnam War, drastically altering her public image. She also steered her acting career toward more serious roles. Look at They Shoot Horses, Don't They? 1969, and Clute, 1971, for which she won her first Oscar. In interviews, Fonda often referred to Barbarella as a final fling with comedic fantasy before the realities of politics and personal convictions took her in a different direction. Retro-futurist wave. Barbarella wasn't alone in the 1960s European sci-fi scene. Films like The 10th Victim, starring Marcello Mastroianni and Danger Diabolic, also embraced erotic or sadomasochistic motifs, whimsical fashion, and pop art set designs. Scholars sometimes call this the retrofuturist wave, an offshoot of the French New Wave and Italian cinema's bold stylings. Many directors were openly fascinated by the collision of high fashion, psychedelia, and social commentary. Barbarella stands out for its brazen sexual content and comedic self-awareness, making it a hallmark of that short but eye-catching era. Unrealized sequels. Believe it or not, a sequel titled Barbarella Goes Down was pitched in 1968. Writers wanted to continue the underwater escapades teased in the original comic. However, the first film's modest box office receipts kept any sequel on ice. In the 2000s, a reboot helmed by Robert Rodriguez and starring Rose McGowan made headlines but never got off the ground due to budget disputes and the questionable commercial appeal of a Barbarella revival. Fans still speculate about whether a modern streaming service might resurrect the concept, but for now, the original film remains the sole official cinematic outing for the iconic space vixen. And there you have it. 30 pieces of behind-the-scenes trivia and cultural lore that make Barbarella a time capsule of 1960s pop art, irreverent camp, and forward-thinking, sometimes risque ideas. Whether you see it as a playful satire of sci-fi tropes or a window into Jane Fonda's early career, the film has carved out a permanent place in cult movie history. It dared to blend futuristic aesthetics with unabashed sensuality, brash comedic turns, and a dash of social commentary, all while celebrating the era's anything-goes spirit. Even decades later, it inspires fashion designers, sparks lively debates about its feminist or exploitative undertones, and holds a devoted fan base that reveres its unrepentant strangeness. So the next time you're in the mood for a cosmic romp that captures the swinging 60s like no other, fasten your space seatbelt and revisit Barbarella's flamboyant voyage, where camp meets couture and science fiction flirts unapologetically with sex appeal.